Let me just, as an aside, say that both Linda and I and a few other people in the audience are in the field of chemical engineering. And that's the field that our previous speaker is in. And I've known Nick now for about 25 years from when I was a junior faculty member, and he's never changed. He's absolutely that excited every day of his life. It's amazing. And the enthusiasm has never diminished whatsoever, and I really appreciate it. In fact, 25 years ago, when he was doing these things, to be honest, he was kind of on the fringe of chemical engineering. And 25 years later, all the chemical engineering departments want people like Nick and Nick's students. They're the core of where the discipline's going. So with that as an aside, thank you, Nick. All right, turning now to this panel of distinguished people. We've talked quite a bit this week about university-industry relations. We've talked a lot about the role of university as engines of innovation. Some of us have written about that and have talked about that extensively. And so I think we have a terrific group of people here to sort of enlarge on that from the perspective of the CEO of the operation. All right? So all of us are down there in the trenches working and so forth and doing great things, we hope. But really it takes leadership to embrace what we're doing, particularly in a time like this when we're kind of changing our culture. And I think this is a representation of people who have embraced that change and are trying to promote it. So what I thought I would do is ask each of them to introduce themselves and just out of curiosity, just say something about what your original academic field was, because I think that's important for a group like this. So Linda, would you like to start that off first?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be part of this panel. I want to tell you that I may disappoint you a little bit. I'm not a chemical engineer, I'm an electrical engineer.
Okay, sorry. But we embrace you anyway.
Yeah. So the work, in fact, that which led me to filing a number of patents, and the work that I'm very proud of, it was in circuit design. I started my work doing theoretical characterization of various systems that were communicating in high frequencies, but as I was moving from my assistant professor position at the University of Michigan to becoming associate and then full, I changed my work from being totally theoretical to becoming primarily mostly experimental, because it was easier to test new ideas in the lab in the area I was working on. And the contributions that I've made, which I'm very proud of, was in finding new ways to develop circuits that were many times smaller in volume, but they had also much better performance, and also circuits that would work in very high frequencies, like terahertz frequencies, where you can, in fact, normally you develop receivers for space and planetary communications and so forth. From there, my work moved to micromachining, because then you find out when you start shaping materials in 3 dimensions. And then, of course, we used organic materials as well. So even if I did not have much of a chemistry background, I have to tell you, I had to learn a lot about chemistry eventually. And materials, as we were using a lot of materials, and we wanted to make sure that they were performing well in high frequencies. So that is the primary area. What really has made it from the lab into applications that have commercialized right now and have become available is through the work of one of my students who started a company in 1994 with me and another colleague from the University of Michigan. And the most interesting thing was a byproduct of my work. My original focus was on defense applications, and a lot of the work, in fact, a lot of the patents have been used extensively by the defense industry, but so it was not really commercialized. But what really became very interesting is an equipment we developed, because when we were trying to create those circuits in terahertz frequencies, we could not measure them. There was nothing available to really help us prove what we were saying was happening. So we had to develop the measurement equipment to be able to demonstrate that those circuits worked, and it was based on electro-optics. And that created a very interesting piece of equipment that is much more powerful for those who are in the electronics. You know, that Hewlett-Packard and now Agilent has developed the network analyzers that have become really very popular. Everybody's using them nowadays. And that was what we were using for circuit characterization. But it's very invasive. So you measure it outside of its environment, and then you try to put it back, and of course, most of the time, you don't get the same results. So this one is a non-invasive system that really characterizes electromagnetic fields in all 3 dimensions, and then gives full information about near field, far fields, and so forth. And that is really the piece of equipment that eventually commercialized, which is kind of interesting. So at the end of it. And I agree with Nicholas that what really gets you there, because I have to tell you, after all of this, I have not really made any money out of that. My work was made available publicly, openly, because I felt that that's what I was supposed to do. And when my students started the company, became available to that company. But it's the satisfaction that you really solve a problem in a practical way and that other people are using it. And so that's really what was driving me.
So I really did think you were a chemical engineer based on the work you'd done on micromachining.
Yes,
I didn't
yes.
know. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Patrick, would you like to say a few
Sure.
words?
So I started my career in civil engineering and operations research in large nonlinear optimization. And I have a set of patents related to the transportation industry in the very early days of GPS. I know my kids can't believe there was life before GPS. But in the early 80s, if people recall the old PYI program, where you had industry match. I had industry match from Rockwell, and at the time, the Burlington Northern Railroad, developing fully automated trains, which really scared people. Sometimes technology is way ahead of its, we could run the train completely automated. Of course, the engineers didn't like this idea, as you can imagine, but it was much more efficient, and so it was and we were able to optimize and control the movement of not just the individual train, but the whole network of trains. And so that became a commercial product, and then I moved on to other endeavors, including at some point not stepping back fast enough and becoming an academic administrator, and led to being dean at the Wharton School, and then the president of the University of Delaware. And in July of this year, I'll do something completely different in my career. I'll become the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia. So I'll become a central banker, which is I'm not sure that's but it's talk about a large, complex, nonlinear system. That is our macro economy. So I don't think we can patent anything on that, but hopefully that kind of systems thinking I'll bring to the Federal Reserve.
So take a look at capital security for all us who need municipal bonds, please. All right. Donald.
Thank you, Hank. I'm a chemist by training, and have worked for most of our scientific life with the pharmaceutical industry. So I understand some of the challenges that were mentioned in terms of taking technology from the laboratory to the commercial marketplace. Just briefly, the University of Arkansas system encompasses a total of 18 different institutions and units. And so I have a portfolio of institutions, all of which consider intellectual property and commercialization as being part of their DNA and things that they need to take into account in all of their promotion and other types of merit review systems. Among those 6 4-year institutions, 5 2-year institutions includes an academic medical complex, medical system, and the Division of Agriculture. And I mention that because most of the technology we've talked about today has been very innovative and involves a lot of tremendous technology and designed in many circumstances to cure some affliction of the human condition. But I think if you look across the globe, you also see that hunger and starvation is equally problematic for the human condition, and with some of the changes that are occurring in the climate, infiltration of salinic environments into agricultural fields, being able to create species that can resist that change in salinity is going to be very important for the future. And so our Division of Agriculture is probably amongst this large portfolio of institutions and researchers, probably the most aggressive in patenting. And it's so important in their DNA that, not just patenting, but also licensing, it's so important in their DNA that they actually have a ceremony each year in which their researchers are rewarded for it. My own personal circumstance is that when I came into this business over 30 years ago, pursuing patents, pursuing commercialization of one's technology was an interesting aside. I was not discouraged from it, but there wasn't a tremendous amount of encouragement. I think it's particularly important that the Academy is addressing this point at this time, because there's a generational issue, and the new faculty that we're hiring expect this to be part of their portfolio, of their talents that they bring to the table for their institution. And so we're looking at that. There are a lot of obstacles to that. In my case, with the pharmaceutical industry, it was the openness of academics clashing with the secretive nature, the intent to protect one's intellectual property with the private sector that led to a lot of interesting conversations with our attorneys. Now the attorneys work for me, I have the ability to influence that conversation.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much. So our theme is university-industry relations and how to promote those and what the benefits are. Maybe each of you could just say a few words about what you're doing at your institution to sort of decrease the friction, if you will, make it easier, and what sorts of things you think those interactions with industry bring to the faculty and to the students. Linda, would you?
So let me just say, first of all, a few things about UC Davis. So UC Davis is a life science university. We probably within the UC, we are one of the 10 University of California campuses. And within the UC, we are the largest life science campus in terms of the number of programs, faculty, and students who are in life science-related programs. The biggest programs we have, of course, are in agriculture. We have in veterinary medicine that involves programs in food, in health, in the area of One Health and global health, of course, a lot of work there. We have a major medical health system that is part of UC Davis, and then we have a School of Biological Sciences, among other disciplines. So a lot of work that we do on the university is related, of course, is based on biology. A lot of it is driven by the need to, and our major work in agricultural science that has changed really agriculture in many ways, or is changing agriculture the way progress made in biology really changed microbiology and some other fields. So that's what is happening in agriculture at this point. And of course, the proximity now that you see between the fields in veterinary medicine, in human medicine, and of course in agriculture and so forth, there is an amazing convergence of these disciplines. And of course, the work that is happening, especially in the microbiome area that brings the nutrition and health together, it's really a fascinating area, and the work is amazing. So, having all that in place, what we have seen is that in the past, the way that traditional agriculture was taking place, and science, and of course, translation through the cooperative extension program, there was not really the type of interaction between industry and the various disciplines in the way that you have seen this interaction taking place, maybe in the biomedical area or in electronics or in the other traditional engineering areas. But there is a very interesting and growing interest from the food industry, as Nestle and Mars, for example, to really come within the institution and interact with faculty in different ways. I mean, it's a very integrated approach to this interaction. So Mars, for example, has embedded a very large number of scientists on our campus. And we have created together an Innovation Institute for Food and Health, which primarily what it does is that the company does not fund, or the companies are not necessarily very interested in funding basic science that is funded by USDA, USAID, or NIH, for example, NSF, but very interested in funding the area between the basic science that is taking place in agriculture and really the problems that farmers are facing, or the public is facing, or the food industry is facing. And that area, this gap has grown because of the way science has really made progress in agriculture. And this is an area where, unless there is particular funding to help in that translation, while there are wonderful ideas and multiple ideas on the campuses coming out of the basic science, there is very little translation that really can be accomplished. So Mars gave us $40 million over a period of 10 years, and the university invests another $20 million to really create that Innovation Institute. And there are other companies that really try to play in the same space. So that is the kind of interaction that we have seen really taking place. There are a lot of seed companies, of course, they're very interested in that regard. And again, the drug companies with clinical trials for the drug companies and so forth. So the university is very interested in supporting those collaborations. It is very important for us, especially for being a land-grant university, not only to perform fundamental science, but also find a way to translate that science into products and services or practices that will really impact the public in a positive way.
I think that last point is especially important. Patrick?
Sure. So a little bit about the University of Delaware. If you think about the University of Delaware and the history of the university, you can't disentangle it from the DuPont Company and the history of the DuPont Company. In fact, that's true of the entire state of Delaware. DuPont Highway, which was the old way of getting to the beaches in Delaware, was built by the DuPont family because they felt it was important that the beaches develop. So you give some sense, at their height, they were the wealthiest family in the world. And the university was a big part of what they wanted to leave as their legacy. In fact, we just celebrated 100 years of chemical engineering at the university, and 75 years ago, Alan Colburn came from the DuPont Company to build the chemical engineering department we have today. Tunde Ogunaki is our Dean of Engineering, and he'll be inducted today, and so if I get this wrong, he'll let me know, I'm sure. So, but if you think about the DuPont Company and what they left us, the state was really built around three industries: chemicals, cars. We had 2 auto assembly plants in the state, and we're a small state, less than 1 million people, and chickens. The Delmarva Peninsula is the largest poultry-producing region in the United States, and we are the fighting blue hens, so poultry is important to us. But the car industry's gone, and that was replaced in the 80s with something called the Financial Center Development Act, which created the modern credit card industry in the United States. All of your credit cards come from Delaware. You may not like that fact, but when they charge you the interest, but they're all coming from Delaware. That's created an enormous industry that's replaced essentially the car industry that we once had. So it's now really chemicals, cars, and chickens, cards and chickens instead of cars. So if you think about the large banks that are in our backyard, often you don't think of a bank as a technology firm, but we've built a series of relationships with the financial services industry over the years. And in particular, I just want to use one example with J.P. Morgan Chase. So J.P. Morgan Chase, one of the largest banks in the United States, spends in excess of $9 billion a year on information technology. $9 billion a year. They are a major technology firm, but people don't think of them that way, and that is a problem for them. So they have a hard time competing against the Googles and the Yahoos of the world in terms of talent. So in 2010, they approached us and said, look, we'd like to build deeper relationships with you. And we launched in 2010, jointly between engineering and our business school, something called the Global Enterprise Technology Internship, which was an in-depth internship with J.P. Morgan Chase including space in our business school building, which is the J.P. Morgan Chase Innovation Center, where our students are working on large-scale, large enterprise information technology platforms. And what they're frustrated by, computer science, traditional computer science departments, students love to write apps, right? And they love going into, the venture campaigns and contests we all have. But they're saying we need people that can run massive, large-scale systems, very complex systems. So they created this in 2010, the GET minor and the GET internship. It led, as I said, to 2011 and them creating an innovation center. And that led then in 2011 also to them investing with us to create an institute for financial service analytics. Think big data in the financial service realm. That then led in a somewhat controversial conversation we had on campus to 2014, we launched the first PhD in financial service analytics in the world. And this is in conjunction with J.P. Morgan Chase, although we completely control the degree. But the data, the real problems are coming from them, and many of their staff, they have a large group of PhDs in physics, computer science, and so forth, working with our faculty in these areas. That then led to, just recently, us launching the Delaware Cybersecurity Initiative and the Delaware Cybersecurity Institute, which is a joint product, not just of the banks like J.P. Morgan Chase, but the military with Aberdeen Proving Ground just to the south of us, which has become the Army's major R&D site, and several other entities taking on the issue of not just the technology around cybersecurity, but also the policy issues. Because there's one last thing that the state of Delaware has that's unique for a very small state. We decide corporate law, our courts in the United States. All major corporations are headquartered in Delaware, and the issues around cybersecurity, the policy issues around cybersecurity, are now being housed in this. So that's the story of, we developed from an undergraduate internship program to a very robust relationship with J.P. Morgan Chase and the other banks. But this was not without controversy on campus, because people somehow felt that we were cozying up, and it was against our history to cozy up to a bank. Because banks by definition are evil, all right, and we heard this on campus. And so how could you do this? And I had to remind people of our history, that the DuPont company, we are the university we are today because of the relationship we have with DuPont for generations. But it still doesn't set well on college campuses today. And I think Delaware is an example of the concern that people have. And some of that is legitimate concern around academic freedom and so forth. But I think if you ask the students who are involved, they don't have any complaints. They get the opportunity to work with state-of-the-art systems and learning things that they simply weren't learning several years ago because our faculty were not up to speed on these large enterprise systems. We've learned a lot from working with our partner, both in terms of research projects, but also in terms of the internships our students have. But I know we'll come back to this, but I do want to talk about the issues this faces on college campuses, particularly within the arts and humanities faculty, who simply do not see why this is advantageous to our students and to the institution as a whole.
Thank you. Don?
Thank you. The situation in Arkansas is a little bit different than Delaware in the sense that the idea of starting up technology companies from scratch, as is prevalent on both coasts, the flow of venture capital into those entities to continue their development is a somewhat foreign concept. And although we certainly have the capital there, as you know, Northwest Arkansas is the home to the Walton family, not only that, but the Walmart Foundation, J.B. Hunt Logistics, and also the chicken industry through Tyson Family Foods. So the money is there, and about 10 or 12 years ago, being approached by some of these families who were interested in continuing the economic relationship between developing economy and the university, we were looking into how we would evaluate technologies for them so they can make prudent investments. And really what we found out is that we were doing a lot of work and everything was a one and done, and we needed a system to be able to encompass and look at more technologies coming out of this portfolio of institutions rather than in some sort of sequential fashion. We hit upon the idea of creating a virtual corporation whose sole purpose really would be to both do the due diligence, but also to then focus some of the investments to continue the economic development. And specifically, we used the portfolio of patent and IP that was coming from the institutions, and using some of these families' monies, we're able to create an investment fund that could pay out in various entities or various amounts as the development of the ideas moved forward. The first thing we had to do, obviously, is evaluate the quality of the idea in terms of its potential in the marketplace. And for that, we hit upon the idea of using basically the SBIR, STTR programs. Obviously, you'll see that we have panels of 20 to 35 individuals. In my area, biomedical research, half my panel are PhDs, half are MDs. Some of those MDs are PhDs. So you could not buy talent like that very easily to do due diligence. So by having individuals who could help structure the proposals, those who would invest a certain amount of money in the fledgling firm, if you will, to take the idea to the panel, one could evaluate the technology, and then the investments, the funds that are available in the area, could go with the idea as it was evaluated and found to be meritorious in the marketplace. From that Virtual Incubation Corporation, there's been a fairly large number of firms that are now homegrown in the Northwest Arkansas area, down through the Little Rock area. And I think I checked with Jim Rankin before I came up here, and he told me that in the past 5 years, none of the startups have gone under that have been moved forward under this program, and some of them are actually profitable at this point.
That's terrific. Thank you. So a lot of good points were raised there. Let's pick up on a few of those, and that is, let's talk a little bit about both the positive aspects of academic industry interactions and some of the things that become negative. I'm going to point out that I spent 14 years at Patrick's University. At the beginning of my career, I was also at PYI in chemical engineering, and it was just wonderful. I have to be honest with you, it was so easy to find money, to work on projects, to match the NSF money. And the companies I worked with and the people in those companies were remarkably benign, meaning they didn't really expect me to do anything for the money except educate students and try hard. And it was really a good experience, and it shaped my viewpoint on these kinds of relationships, but it might have shaped it in an artificial way. I don't know. You know, maybe it was just Shangri-La for a chemical engineering chemist, but let's talk about that. Linda?
So, of course, the positives, let me start with those, is that it allows faculty and students to really come in contact with those who deal with the real problems. It is very easy as a intellectual in a university environment to isolate yourself in your own lab and then try to develop the problem which then you have to proceed to solve. And it may be very intense theoretical or experimental work, but then it may not necessarily lead you into solving something important. So, having the opportunity to connect with people who really know what the real issues are is very critical. Second advantage, of course, is that a lot of times, especially in my area, it was very difficult to have access to tools and facilities because they were very expensive. So by having these interactions with industry, I was able to have access to facilities that I would never really be able to use, and then that helped me promote make progress with my own work. And of course, especially if you interact with the right people, you get a flow of ideas that eventually push you forward intellectually. The negatives, if a lot of times, most companies, especially the ones who, in the old days, let me just say, the old days companies did have their own research laboratories. So they had a group of basic science or basic technology programs that they were interested in. And you could connect with these groups and eventually push yourself forward in the basic science or basic technology area. Later, however, as the IBM and in GM, for example, and the other big companies gave up their own research laboratories. They ended up focusing more on near-term problems, and they were looking for near-term solutions. If then you as a faculty member really focus and be driven by those near-term needs, then your work will never really take off, and then you will never really have enough time to look at the fundamental problems that you will need as a scientist or as an engineer to look at, so you can make the breakthroughs that are important. So I would say when it comes to industry, a good balance between funding that will allow you to do the fundamental work and then industrial collaborations that will also guide you in finding the important problems will be the right way to go.
So on the plus side, I agree with everything Linda said. On the plus side, I really think this world that we're entering, the economy we're entering, increasingly employers, others want to know that we can get things done, right, that we're doers. This struck me when I first came to Delaware. A former alum and student of mine when I was at Penn was actually our astronaut, Garrett's boss, Elon Musk. So I had Elon, I've known Elon since he was a young man and as a student at Penn, and then as he followed his career. And so I had Elon. It's hard to get Elon to come on campus to speak, by the way. He doesn't do that very often, but he came when I first came to Delaware, and I remember him giving this talk. It was really inspirational about SpaceX and Tesla, and of course all the people in the area who had Teslas brought all their Teslas to have Elon sign them, so they're running around with signed Teslas. But this young man, when it came to Q&A, jumps out of his seat. And he said, you could say rockets out of his seat. And he says, look, Mr. Musk, I would do anything to work for you. I knew that where this was going. This kid was in trouble. So Elon says, well, who are you? What's your major? What do you blah, blah, blah. He says, good, so you've passed the bar. Now, what have you done? The kid says, well, like, I'm the president of my fraternity. And so, no, I don't care about it. What have you done? Look, I'm busy. I need people that can get things done. You have to prove to me you can do something before I hire you. And this kid was sad, and, he put his head down. I talked to him afterwards. But that's not just Elon anymore. We're hearing this more and more, that organizations want to know that whether we produce our students who can get things done, or we as faculty can be collaborative members of teams that actually produce results, whether they're short-term or long-term. And I do agree that you often have to guard against the short-term focus. So I think that's a positive here. It's forcing us to work more in collaborative teams and really focus on some significant long-term problems. And I think that's a good thing. The bad thing, the problem I see hitting universities right now is the dirty little secret of American higher education is that research does not pay for itself, right? That we subsidize research through undergraduate tuition dollars or state support. But increasingly, we're under cost pressure to keep tuition down, which you can understand society pressuring us to do that. And so the subsidies that we've traditionally given to research weren't so bad when the federal government was paying almost its full cost, right, in terms of the indirect costs. Industry doesn't like paying indirect costs at all very often. We have long, protracted discussions with them about this. This raises, I think, an issue that has to be addressed with the consortia, various consortia of industry leaders saying, look, we know this shift has happened, right? The shift has happened from you not doing fundamental research to us doing fundamental research that you're benefiting from. But we can't keep this enterprise going given the cost of research and the inability or unwillingness of the federal government to fully support it. I think that is one of the big issues, because right now it's all hidden. Individual faculty members get their grant, it looks good, but universities as a whole can't sustain this model for much longer, in my view.
Thank you. The American Chemical Society had a program a few years ago in which an industrial chemist or chemists would spend some time in academic institutions, and in turn, academic scientists would spend an equivalent amount of time, a semester, a year, on a sabbatical in their corporate equivalent. And I remember reading the statement that came back from one of those that had participated in the program, and it was an industrial chemist who had spent some time in an academic institution. And he said that academic institutions, departments, are so democratic, it's a miracle anything gets done. And really, in a nutshell, that sort of tells you about some of the issues that really we face because there's a different culture. One of the things that I think is very encouraging is that we're seeing an understanding on both parts that we're both working toward a common good, that is the betterment of society, and that it's much easier for us to work together because, as was pointed out, industry is taking a short-term look, and we in academics can take a longer-term look at problems. And so, you know, there's a strength in the partnership, a synergy that doesn't exist with either of us apart. The plus side that we have seen, and again, I'm looking across an entire state, multiple institutions, is that our corporate partners are bringing to the table in a variety of disciplines in the business area, not just agriculture and science and technology, but in other areas also, real-world problems that give our students experience, and also a body of experts in addition to the faculty that we can look to for insight. And that is a wonderful thing for our students, and in turn, the students' employment prospects are improved. The downside is that we still don't understand each other well in terms of, as was pointed out, arts and science faculty. As an ex-dean of an arts and science faculty, I do understand this, that the profit motive, which was just not a four-letter word, is important to our corporate partners. It's critically important to our corporate partners, but not so much maybe to some in our fields. And so what I have been telling our managers, what I've been telling our attorneys, is that when we start to look for these types of arrangements, we're going to have to think much differently than we have in the past. We're going to have to think in a flexible way that has not been possible. I have the advantage that our academic institutions in the state are protected from the political process because of a constitutional amendment that the citizens voted on a number of years ago. And that does give us, we don't use that power just randomly, but we use it when we have to, and it does give us the protection to be able to think a little bit outside what the state attorneys tell us is possible or prudent for us to do when it makes sense for us from an academic point of view.
Thank you. So I do want to come back to the culture question that Patrick raised, but not right this minute. Before we do that, what I want to do is say something and get opinions on this. But, you know, been in this game for a while at Penn State, at Delaware, now at Missouri. And what I've seen over the last 10 years is a decreased tendency among companies to come in and do what they used to do, which was to license a group of patents from us and then to take it off and develop it. Today, what we hear more often is, tell you what, we think this is interesting. Why don't you start a company, run that company for 3 or so years, de-risk it for us, and then if we like it, we'll come in and buy the whole company. We don't care if it ever reaches revenue. That's not important. What we'd like to see is you take the technology closer to the marketplace. And we had a notorious example of this at Penn State, where one of our most brilliant chemists had come up with a method that was the equivalent of PCR, but could be done isothermally. And for any of you who have done PCR and know anything about it, you have to do these tremendous thermal cycles up and down, and because of that, it's a little bit complicated. But even though this presented itself as a major breakthrough, we had to take it closer to the marketplace. Now, that's easy to say, but now I find myself literally trying to raise money, and I'll be doing this tomorrow, for a venture fund for the University of Missouri, because there's no other place. I can't use undergraduate tuition, as Patrick's pointed out, to do this, although I might use a little, but to get started. But we have to raise venture capital now. And so, you know, some of you have done it, some of you haven't done it, but if I don't have that venture fund in place, I won't be able to take the technology further down the line to get it across that valley of uncertainty, if not death, to the place where they would purchase the company. Now, if they purchase the company, and we've had a couple of those, the payback is enormous, much better than licensing. So what are your experiences with that? Have you seen that, and thoughts on that issue?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I would say we have seen two different types of behaviors from industry. The larger industry, larger companies would like to work with us so they co-own the patents. and they will ask for an exclusive licensing. And that's okay. I mean, there are, the smaller ones exactly do that. They want to put the risk with the universities. They do not want to risk their own funds, and they may or may not use eventually the IP that has been generated, but it is true that they will not invest themselves for that translation. The other thing also we have seen is that even venture capitalists, I mean the venture capital companies, will not even invest as much anymore. They have very focused areas they go after, and in some ways they may prefer to put a lot more money behind one idea they really strategically would like to pursue than less money into more ideas. So you see that problem as well. What we have tried to do within the University of California system, and then more specifically at UC Davis, is to create our own venture capital fund, but not out of venture capitalists, all right? So the UC system took part of, we have a huge pension system. We are probably the only university that has a defined benefit contribution. And in the UC, the pension system has an endowment of close to 90 billion. So we took part, and of course they invest all of this money. The system took about 250 million out of this, and they're going to use that to make investments into ideas that have the potential to really do something, to create a breakthrough or develop something very unique. In addition to that, UC Davis has created its own venture catalyst program that is a combination of our own funds plus a group of banks and other companies. So they have not committed funds to us, but we allow our faculty and students who are interested in starting a company to get connected with these individuals. So in reality, we help them do the fundraising. And in addition to that, we have also approached the state that has shown some interest in doing the same thing through their own funds, especially through the cap and trade program. So the state of California has the cap and trade that really has created close to 1 or 2 billion the first year. And then that is utilized towards all kinds of different things, especially in the area of climate change or sustainability and so forth. And for ideas in this particular area, we can use that program as well. So it's a combination. It's not easy. It's very difficult. And we also know, all right, that you may have a great idea. So that's the other difficult thing, and that you may have a great idea, you may have a great product, and then you may find that the public is not interested. So it's a very difficult space to be in. And not every idea eventually makes it in a big way out there. So I understand why the outside investors are very conservative because they have lost a lot of money. I understand why universities are very conservative because we run our IP and tech transfer offices, and very few of us make any money, right? The cost of creating these patents really and the return is not even balancing at times. And it's really difficult to work in that space. So a lot of efforts have been made, but I have to tell you that even if I was involved for a number of years in work within the Department of Commerce. There were a lot of discussions at the academy level, Academy of Engineering, all kinds of different efforts really to see how to solve the problem. This area has remained the death valley. And then we have not really made any major, headways out of this.
Thank you. Patrick, I know you've done a lot of financial engineering. So.
Yeah, so in the last 8 years, since I've been at Delaware, we've really changed our model. We patent far fewer discoveries, and we try to take the few to the market and get signals from the market that this is worth something. And I'll come back to that. So a good example is we have an electric vehicle technology, which is a joint venture between us and NRG, the large energy company, with in-kind contributions from BMW and Honda. And so we have signals from the market that this has potential. What I worry about, and it's not just a Delaware issue, but my old life at Penn, 23 years at Penn, I saw the same thing. Often, those decisions are tainted by a dean, an administrator, wanting to appease the faculty member, and possibly it's a retention issue. And I worry that we in universities aren't necessarily hard-nosed enough about making those decisions and saying, look, we don't think this is worth anything, we hope we're wrong, take it, good luck, as opposed to kind of spreading everything out a little bit and not really focusing on a few things that we think can make a big difference. And so, to me, I'd like to get I like getting those signals from the market that say we're willing to put something into this because we think it's worth it. I do worry that if we do our own thing 100% of the time, and we have a situation right now we're facing where the faculty member has struggled with a firm, is looking at the university to help save the firm. And that's a prominent faculty member. That's a difficult situation that administrators face, and often we are on the side of let's keep peace in the valley, as opposed to what a venture capitalist would do or an angel investor would do and say, sorry, that's a tough decision for us. It's a cultural issue.
I couldn't have said it better. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we created this buffering, this virtual incubation corporation, to help us make those tough decisions. You know, we really face two different types of venture capital needs. So one, if it's a standard idea, it's of a level of magnitude, of course, with the medical center, and if our idea requires clinical trials before the viability of the idea moves forward, the number of zeros that follow goes up considerably. And so we actually have two different funds and mechanisms for this to isolate the two different situations.
So I have a lot more questions I'd like to ask, observations I'd like to make, and so forth, but the president of the academy is sitting in the back of the room saying you've got 1 minute. Is that right? So is that true, Paul? Yeah. So we got to...
Oh, my.
Well, but we pay the bus drivers, right? Okay, I'm just kidding. Look, I want to thank these folks for doing this. I've been close enough to presidents for a number of years to know that this is probably one of the, and chancellors, one of the most difficult jobs on the face of the earth, and most of us don't realize how hard the job is. It's 24/7, and for them to come up here and actually spend time with us and to share their ideas openly and frankly, I think is really quite remarkable. So thanks to all three of you, and good luck in whatever you're doing next.
Thank you. Good to be with you. Good luck in the new job. I was thrilled when I read the newspaper.